Welcome back to the Deep Analysis webcast. This is episode 2. And today I'm talking to Marit Lage experts Jarvis Yu and Tom Hepp. And they're here because they have strong histories of making Marit Lage. So, Jarvis, who are you? Why are you qualified to talk about lands?
So, as Ari Lax once put it, Rashad Port and Dark Depths were responsible for half of my pro points in one singular season, which resulted in me being gold for basically, I don't know, 1.5 years off of that, which is kind of an insane achievement and something I probably won't repeat. And during that season, I think I had like a 80% win rate in GPs with lands. So kind of insane. You really can't ask for more than that in a 1.5 year span of Magic.
I remember that year you won a GP with lands, and then you made a small misstep in the top 8 of the next GP that you may
Yeah.
have won otherwise. I'm not going to beat you with your punts, but you know what you did. And then
Yeah, I
you
do.
got ninth on breakers in the third consecutive GP, all with lands, right?
There was actually one in between where I got a draw with Wesco and finished 10-4-1 at Louisville. Then the next one I got ninth at Vegas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but those were all with lands. So yep.
Yeah, powerful. I remember that. You
Yeah.
convinced me, uh, incidentally, just by existing, you convinced me to try lands, and I learned quickly that I didn't like it. But
I remember having that conversation with you. You were really not a fan of the deck, and honestly, it's pretty different. Yeah.
yeah, like coming from a brainstorm background and an elves
Oh,
background, I was just like, okay, how do I play this? And I would ask you like, how do you sideboard it against like Grixis Dollar? And you were like, well, on the play I do this, this, this. On the draw I do this, this, this. But if you see this, then you do this. And if you see this, then this. But if they play this way, you have to do this. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't want to put in the work to learn this deck, but it sounds really good. So uh,
fair
thank
enough.
you for throwing crap at the wall trying to teach me how to play lands all those years ago.
Yep.
So my other guest is Negator77. You may recognize him from the top of the Legacy Trophy board at any point in history. Tom Hepp. Hello, Tom. You're here to talk about depths.
Yeah, definitely here to talk about depths. I think you hit it. I don't have Jarvis's accomplishments. Haven't played in the GP circuit, so I'm just hoping to keep up a little bit in this round table.
Yeah, I'm sorry to pull you away from Magic Online. I think you would accumulate 2 or 3 trophies during the hour it would take us to record this video. So I appreciate your sacrifice.
It's fine. It's fine. I'm sure Pokemuki thanks you.
Yeah, he can get probably two rounds played in that amount of time with the
One and a half probably. Yeah.
yeah, the Stifle Uro master himself. So we're here to talk about the different shells that Marit Lage is in, lands and dark depths. So before we begin, in case anyone doesn't know, the combo we're talking about is removing the counters from dark depths without paying 30 mana to do it. The most popular ways to do it, Thespian Stage is the big one. You use Thespian Stage to copy Dark Depths. Now you have 2 of the same legendary permanent. You sacrifice the original Dark Depths, keeping the one without any counters on it because Thespian Stage does not arrive with 10 ice counters. And suddenly you have a Dark Depths with no ice counters, which triggers the Marit Lage clause. So you get Marit Lage. And then Tom also has Vampire Hexmage, which can sacrifice itself to remove all the 10 ice counters, and skadoosh, you have a Marit Lage. So that's what we're talking about. But the fact that you make Marit Lage is basically the only thing that lands and depths have in common. Who is Marit Lage? I'll do a brief aside on this. Marit Lage is a mysterious and powerful being from ancient times in Dominaria. She was frozen by enemies into the Glacier of Ronom about 500 years before the Ice Age storyline happened. And nobody really knows what she is or what she's capable of. She can travel planes, but she's not a planeswalker. She's much more like an Eldrazi than anything else. She is a she, that is canon, and nobody really knows that much about her except that she's big and bad and indestructible. So there have been some ways to free her from the ice in more recent Magic printings, but back in the Ice Age, she was just referenced on a few cards, but we never really saw her. And then in Cold Snap, we got Dark Depths. And then in Gate Crash, we got Thespian Stage. Zendikar gave us Vampire Hexmage, and there's another card from Modern
Yep.
Horizon that makes Marit Lage, but I could not tell you what it does. I'll have a picture of it by the time this airs.
I can tell you the name of the card. It's
Oh,
Marit Lage's Slumber. Whenever a snow permanent comes into play, you can scry one. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 10 or more snow permanents, you sacrifice this and make a Marit Lage.
oh, easy game. That they learned that you need to like add to this one to make Marit Lage rather than subtract from it. So that was smart. All right, so let's talk about lands first because that's the older deck. I'll set this up a little bit. That before Gate Crash, which was printed in 2013, that gave us Thespian Stage. Lands was a weird deck. Like, if you were playing back then, you've probably seen it around. It was not the like real meta player that it is now because it was preposterous. The deck played Wasteland, Rishadan Port, all the things you'd expect to destroy lands. The Life from the Loam engine was there, all of that was there. But it didn't have a real win condition. Like, it couldn't just make a 20/20 and kill you when it was ready. Every game with lands went to the mat, it went to time. The way that they killed you was assembling Mindslaver with Academy Ruins and 12 mana to keep looping their Mindslaver. So I guess it's 13, right? Including the ruins. You pay
Yep.
2, tap the ruins, put Mindslaver on top, 6 to cast, 4 to activate. Yeah, it's a 13 mana combo to take all the turns for the rest of the game. And then once they're taking all the turns, they play some creature land like Mishra's Factory or a Creeping Tarpit. Creeping Tarpit was actually a huge upgrade when that card was printed
Yep.
because you don't have to play a colorless land in your deck. But lands was blue based back then. It took forever. If you get paired against lands, you know you're going to be there a while. But everything changed in 2013 with Thespian Stage. Jarvis, you want to pick us up from there? I believe it was Kurt Spies who first innovated the red-green land shell that we all know now.
Yeah, so a few things about that. It was pretty common for pre-Gate Crash lands to play a bunch of creature lands. Sometimes they even played Treetop Village. And something that would actually often happen would be they would leave up Wasteland versus untapped white mana to waste their own creature land to keep loaming it back as well. So you couldn't just remove all of their win cons. A lot of them actually didn't play Mindslaver or only played in the sideboard, but it depended on the exact iteration. Um, to that point, Kurt actually played the blue base intuition land decks a lot, and that's why he owned a Tabernacle to begin with. So, but then he realized once Gate Crash came out, there's no reason to be so high on the mana curve. If you could just lower the mana curve by not playing all of these clunky cards, just be more efficient, play Punching Fires, play Max Gamble, play really to the board and quickly, you could actually take advantage and beat the fast blue decks like Delver as well. So that's kind of where it happened. Over the years since Kurt did that, there's been changes in and out, adding colors, subtracting colors, you know, um, metagame shifts.
Right. So the really big breakout time for lands was during Deathrite Shaman's reign.
Yep.
Deathrite Shaman and Thespian Stage were in the same block. They were printed one set apart. And so they entered the format basically hand in hand on opposite sides of the spectrum. So why did lands thrive during that era? Why were you able to just farm GPs for an entire season straight to gold pro status?
So I think really the major reason is a lot of people did not own this deck in paper. So the amount of people who actually played against this deck more than like once wasn't really that high. So that I think that was a large portion of it. And really the second part of it was I think the Punching Fire Grove interaction made you actually good versus Deathrite Shaman instead of being bad versus Deathrite Shaman. But then once people started figuring out that if you just force it and lift up your Deathrite, it became a lot harder. And it it was a combination of the deck being pretty well positioned, people not having reps versus it, and like the engine actually being functional most of the time, especially if you waited for a second Grove, or used your Thespian Stage to copy Grove to play around the Death Right or Surgicals, you know?
Yeah, I definitely remember it was a small number of people who did well all the time with lands. There was you, Kurt, of course, Daryl
Yep.
Ayers,
Hmm.
Paul Muller before he switched to being a Storm Boy. He was a lands boy.
Yeah.
I just like it seemed like every Star City Legacy Open, at least one of you was in the top 8 with lands, and it was just it was everywhere and nowhere at the same time because, like you said, Tabernacle's expensive. The cards don't really overlap with other decks. Like you need explorations, mana bonds, gambles, crop rotations, and basically no other deck plays those. So plus Dark Depths itself, that was expensive for a long time. It's gotten a few reprints since then. It was just a very expensive deck that was very hard to play, and those of you who were dialed in reap the rewards for it.
Funny story about my Tabernacle. I got it from one Jason Ford. You might recognize that name, for $250 when he was selling out of Legacy at a certain point. And to the Star City thing, Dave Long was actually one of the huge crushers with the deck.
Oh right, Dave Long, of course.
Local to me, probably lives 15 minutes away. Obviously, we don't really hang out anymore for obvious reasons. But I would beat him when I was playing non-lands versus his lands, and he would still make top 8 of the Open, and I wouldn't. Like, this happened like 3 times in a row, where I would just beat him in like round 5. Then Dave decided, losing stupid. Why would I lose again? And just make top 8 after I beat him 3 times in a row, or something like that. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, Dave Long is one of the most long-term disciples of Marit Lage. He switched to Depths. I know him more recently as a Depths master, and he was a lands master before that. I almost forgot because he is synonymous with Depths in my brain at this point. So, what is lands weak to, just as an archetype?
The answer, generally speaking, is fast combo is really what you don't want to play against. But more specifically nowadays, I think Force of Negation is sort of what made it kind of bad. And actually, Modern Horizons in general, I think, was unfriendly to the deck because it turned out that Renin 6 being used against lands was better than Renin 6 was in lands, if that makes a lot of sense.
That makes perfect sense. And yeah, Force of Negation, just a main deck exile effect for Light from the Loam, is such a huge deal. I was actually recording a league earlier today where my Delver opponent had 2 cards left in hand, and I had Loam, and I was like, as long as it's not Force of Negation, we win. But it was. So that's right. It is a huge deal. I also remember that old Death Ray Chem in metagame, the lands versus Delver top tier was just smashed in half right down the middle by Red Stompy, just like the Blood Moon deck that could smush both Delver and lands. And that I remember that being tough. One of the 2 tournaments I played lands at, it was the Eternal Extravaganza, the one at a flea market. You were there too. We both played lands. We both got obliterated by Blood Moons. And Ely Cassis won that tournament with none other than Dark Depths combo. This Black-Green Depths. Which
I remember this, yeah.
Yeah, so that seems like such a perfect point to switch this conversation because the mighty, unbeatable lands monster Jarvis Yu made like a 1-2 exit from that tournament, which ended up being won by a different Marit Lage deck, which is Black-Green Depths. Tom, how long have you been playing the deck?
Since about 2015.
2015.
One version or another. I started with straight Black-Green Turbo, and basically hated the deck so much that I built a new deck around, built a new shell for it, just to not have to play the existing version.
Right.
And then played that for a long time before switching back to Turbo and then switching to Rainbow recently. But it's been pretty steady since about 2015.
All right, cool. So there's about a 2-year gap before you were on the deck, and the deck existed almost immediately in some form or another. The early versions played Into the North, which is a rampant growth for snowlands, and Dark Depths is a snowland. So I thought that technology blew my mind the first time I saw it. There was some tournament, even before Ely won that Eternal Extravaganza with Depths. I remember it was like a GP 40 Duels side event or something that was won by Black-Green Turbo Depths. And the Legacy community laughed. We were like, what is this? The not of this world? Are you kidding? Like, there's 4 Spirit Guide, 4 Lotus Petal, 4 Crop Rotation. This is crazy. Sejiri Step, what a joke. But that deck was the shell that became the monster that it is today. We've gotten away from Into the North and Fling, early versions of the deck, played actual Fling, and I'm pretty sure the only red source was Lotus Petal. So that was questionable technology. I'm glad to see it go. So that was the turbo build of the deck. And that one just, all it did was make Marit Lage early and often and try to protect it for one turn to deal 20. Then there was another version of Slow Depths, where when the metagame adjusted to a quick Marit Lage, Slow Depths, it was a Mox Diamond deck with Dark Confidant and just sort of could play a more mid-range game, had a bunch of discard spells in it, a more robust sideboard plan. And that deck existed for a while. Tom, did you ever play Slow Depths?
Only when requested. So
Okay.
I did some like matchup VODs for people that wanted to play. They asked me, they're like, "You want to play Depths versus this for a matchup VOD?" And I was like, "Okay." And then we went to record, and they're like, "I want you to run this version." I was like, "Okay," but I've never actually played it in a real tournament.
Okay, yeah, and that's a pretty different deck to just spring on you. Like that is not just like the same. It's not like giving blue red delver to a rug delver player.
Yeah, I mean, I'd played the dedicated depth strategies, and just in my time playing other formats, I played Jund-esque strategies, so it
Yep.
wasn't really that off the wall. Like the two strategies aren't. It's not like what you were discussing earlier, where you're trying to pick up lands from elves. The strategies weren't that different. I felt okay.
Yeah, that was a far cry. The black green like turbo depths has been around. It started as a meme. The shell started to get better. They dropped the Into the North, dropped the Fling. Slow Depths emerged. Slow Depths sort of switched back and forth with Turbo Depths. There was a period of Legacy where like my opponent would play like Urborg turn one, and I'm like, oh god, do I have to answer like Dark Confidant and Hymn to Tarok, or just a Marit Lage? What do I do with my brainstorm? Like, what do I need to sculpt here? And that was actually kind of a scary time. Uh, it's tough when two decks look so similar but actually play so differently from the enemy side. I first became aware of you and your work with Bug Depths. Tell me about that process. How did you get there?
So it was basically right around 2015 when I started. It was a random Star City Games something. They weren't called opens back then. I don't know whether it was a 10K or a 20K. There was something that was in the area where the Philly, the King of Prussia Casino tournaments are now. It was in that area, but it was in a convention center that was attached to a dog show. So I decided I wanted to go and picked up a deck from the source forums and played Black Green Turbo. And I just absolutely despise the shell. The deck just has no way. It doesn't have Dark Confidant like the slow versions to do. It doesn't have any way to fix its draws. So when you need crop rotation for a bog or a series step against the relevant decks, you draw those cards. You're just stuck with them. Like you have no way to interact with plow if you in some of those spots if you have crop rotation and draw the step. It just had clunky draws. You're just totally at the mercy of your top decks. I just really did not like it. So the first thing I wanted to do was have some way to mitigate those kind of situations. So I just decided that Brainstorm was so far and away the best card in the format that my list was just going to start with four Brainstorms and I was going to find a way to make that work. So the only way to do that was with Mox Diamonds at the time. So I built the mana base around the Mox Diamond setup. And the deck already had so many land tutors and then fetch lands on top of that that it had like 16 to 18 shuffle effects depending on the variation. And another weak spot for the turbo shells was discards nice and all and like the combo matchups, but you also run into these situations where most of the combo decks are able to protect like an ad nauseum or a tutor, play out their mana and just protect it with a brainstorm or protect it with, or keep a card on top with ponder and then just untap and kill you. And the discard doesn't really help you there. So the blue splash helps with boarding in a pile of flusterstorms to give you an added dimension to fight the top of their deck too, as opposed to just the discard. And the Stifle was just a one of. Another card I really disliked in the Turbo Shell early on was Pithing Needle. Like it's obvious why it's there. You want to name Wasteland, you want to name Caracas, and varying other effects in the format. But at the time, Ant was a huge deck. A bunch of decks where Needle basically had no text other than like trying to snipe fetch lands when you're playing Urborg and turning them into swamps anyway. It just seemed like a really bad card, and Stifle felt like it occupied some of the same space against Wasteland and Caracas, but also helped you fight different combo matchups and different matchups in a better way. So I felt that the blue splash just gave the deck a lot more play than the black-green deck had.
Yeah, it turns out that adding Brainstorm to a deck can make it better in a lot of situations. I also remember those early days where you had to play around the one stifle against bug depths. Like after your list sort of took off and people were playing it, it was like, do I respect the one stifle? Can I respect the one stifle? This sucks. I wish they would just play four, so I knew I had to respect it. But yeah, the one stifle was a beating for those of us on the other side.
Some great memories in tournaments where like really good players are like birding their friend's hand and like actively rooting for them to get stifled in key spots.
Stifle is a monster. It's one of those cards that's the best when you don't expect it. It's probably better as a one of in some ways than it is as a four of, especially with open deck lists. It's just like your opponent knows they play just weird enough that it'll give you time even if you don't have it. The Depths deck is great at forcing them into a spot where they get stifled. Like if you just have like Marit Lage incoming and they have to go for the Wasteland, then they don't get to play around stifle anymore. So it's very cool innovation there. When did that morph into Rainbow and why?
It didn't move. It didn't morph directly into Rainbow. There was probably like a 9 month to a year period where I was back on just straight turbo, like straight black green. Like I made some personalized changes to the list, but it was the core of the plan was basically just a black green turbo shell. Slow Depths just got into this place where too many of the fire printings just crippled the deck. Like Mox Diamond in any deck that doesn't have a card recoup engine, whether that's Life from the Loam or Sylvan Library or Dark Confidence, something you have to have some way to offset the loss because now it just becomes an elk or it just gets hit by incidental cards and it just wrecks a 3-color mana base if you get your Mox Diamond hit anytime early in the game. So that was a big hit. Veil of Summer was another big hit. Like the disruption in the bug list was 8 discard spells, 3 Flusterstorms, 2 Assassin's Trophies, and 2 Decays in the sideboard. Like Veil of Summer just literally hits every single piece of disruption in the deck. So that was another sore spot. And then just other decks just becoming faster and better, the Dreadhordes of the world and everything else, life gain from Euro. It's just, you almost, as a depth strategy, in my opinion, nowadays, you almost have to have the ability to threaten them on turn 2 or turn 3, literally every single game, like clockwork to try and get under them or prevent them from tapping out for Oko, that kind of thing, where when Bug Depths was a stronger deck, you were worried about them tapping out for Jace. So you're talking about a much bigger window to present the combo and, do the virtual port thing. And that's just not really, it's just not really an option anymore. I mean, I love that deck. It just doesn't work currently.
Right. So you went back to black green just for raw speed because we can't beat these Bane Drifters, the Okos and the Uros and the Dreadhorde Arcanists of the world. So back to black green for speed. What's up with Rainbow Depths? That's the new hotness. I tried it on my channel. It was the first time I had ever played any Depths deck, and I easily 5-0'd my league. And it was like, is this what Tom's been doing this whole time? We've been letting him get away with this? So
to be fair, I watched your video and you had a couple of the better matchups for Rainbow. Hogak is one of the most lopsided decks in the format. And I think you played that one twice, if I remember correctly. So we didn't give you the full workout. We didn't get you the Esper Vials, the D&Ts.
Yeah.
I think we want to run you through your paces before
well, I mean, the fact still stands that I have a higher win rate with Rainbow Depths than you do, right?
I'm a big sports fan, and I believe that to qualify for a percentage race, you have to have a minimum sample.
Okay, all right. I'll believe that. I will stop joking. Tom is obviously way better at the deck than me. But how did we get to Rainbow Depths? What is that? It's insane. I haven't seen a City of Brass in Legacy since like 2012, and it was only in Dredge. I guess the Epic Storm was up to that sort of thing back then too. Like, how is it back? Why are we doing that?
So, one piece about the early history of the deck that when I did my initial research on it that I came across was some people were doing not just the fling thing, but they were literally running Copperline Gorges, and you would see the occasional like Gemstone Mine kind of land to go with like a playset of expedition maps to find the red sources. So it wasn't completely unheard of to try that sort of thing. It just no one just went all out and ran all of them to that degree. So it's basically just kind of I saw a few posts from some players running Stifle and lands, and I kind of missed bug depths. I missed the playstyle. I don't like jamming. I don't like jamming turbo repeatedly. Like the deck just gets kind of monotonous after a time. So I wanted to try something different. So I just said, I'm going to run all the blue cards that I really enjoy. So I jammed 4 Stifles into a turbo shell, put all the Flusterstorms back in the sideboard. I was like, I'm just going to run this. And I looked at it for a while trying to figure out how to make the mana work. I was looking at Mox Diamond. I was like, I just can't go back to Mox Diamond. There's no way to make a fetch land mana base work when you're starting with 4 colorless depths, 4 colorless stage, and then you're running off color lands like Shaziri Step, Wasteland, or Ghost Quarter. Like there's just no space without cutting into the core of the deck. So there's the only way to do it and get to a minimum color count for all 3 colors was just to run all 5 color lands. So I decided to make it even better because one of the biggest holes for black green was their green count and their black count is obscenely low. Like that deck mulligans so heavily because it just doesn't have functioning hands. You just can't cast your spells in hands. So I took the Caracas out of the main deck and moved that to the sideboard. And then by not running any basics, you kind of get a virtual slot there to jam another 5 color land in. So that was the only way to make the mana work, essentially. It wasn't some big epiphany. I had no other options. So
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
I noticed that you didn't even mention Submerge in that entire narrative, which, like, to an outside observer, I would assume that this was a solution to a Submerge heavy metagame. Because Submerge is one of the cards that blue decks always relied on, like Delver decks. Before Delver started playing Caracas just for a Reanimator and Marit Lage, it was Submerge or Bust pretty much to remove a 2020. And the Rainbow Depths deck has no forests in it. It has no swamps in it. It has Gemstone Mine and Mana Confluence and City of Brass. So was that just a happy accident that you also get to dodge this potent 8 card?
So I think I'm going to just differ from a lot of people's opinions on this. I think most competent depths players can beat Submerge easily, even with a black-green mana base. It's not particularly hard with Reclaimer and 4 crop rotations and just sequencing properly using your Spirit Guides and Petals for green instead of playing the Bayou. Like, there's only 3 forests in most black-green lists, and you're running essentially a 5 crop rotation deck. If you're aware of it, which you should be if you're playing versus Rogue Delver lists that had 2 or 3 copies of it at the time, you can generally beat it if you want to. Are there going to be games where you just are forced to play a Bayou or a Forest to be able to cast like a Scrying or something like that? Yeah, they come up, but they also have to have it, and it also has to get through your discard. Like, over the years running Bug with Forests and running Black-Green with Forests, I've found that I very rarely lose to Submerge. So is it nice to just be able to just put it into the back of your brain like I don't even have to care about this card? Yeah, that's that's nice, but that wasn't something that I was thinking about when I built the list.
Fair enough. Yeah, I played against the list a couple weeks ago with some blue deck, and I had a Submerge in the sideboard, and I had to bring it in just because, like, I know you didn't have any forests, but I just had to hope to play to a point where I had 5 mana to cast the thing. Just that. Yeah, it was rough. Like that's just a 2020 indestructible requires a specific answer, even if it costs 5. Depths is still obviously very much a potent force in this metagame. You mentioned when I brought up my league that I beat Hogak twice, and I didn't play against any Death and Taxes. So what are the good and bad matchups? Like what are the laughers and what are the gut punches?
The Laughers are generally the graveyard decks. Just because just the 1 of Bog and a 9 tutor deck is just such a beating. Plus you have such a fast combo to begin with. Like, Hogak has no flyers either, so they can't interact with your combo. You have 9 and the Bog itself, so basically 10 main deck ways to just wreck their entire graveyard, plus you're discarding their hand. And then post board, you just get ley lines and surgicals too, and removal spells for their altars. Like there's just nothing they can do. There's just so much hate for the graveyard on top of the quick combo. The graveyard decks are just in a really bad space. So I would never ever want to play versus Depths with Dredge or Hogak or Black Red Reanimator. It's just those are just really, really, really tough matchups to lose consistently. As far as the difficult matchups, it's anything that has some combination of like the three most potent cards against the strategy, which I would say is are Wasteland, Swords to Plowshares, and Caracas. So the decks that run all three of those numbers are the hardest matchups. So Death and Taxes, Esper Vial, Maverick, those kind of shells are generally the hardest ones.
I noticed you did not include Shark Still on your list there. My viewers will appreciate the fact that my control deck contains all three of those cards.
Yeah, Needle has text in that matchup. I like
Yeah, it
naming
does.
Shark Typhoon.
I had definitely lost because my Shark Typhoons were needled and I couldn't produce a blocker. Going back to Jarvis for a minute, I see lands sometimes. I've seen it adopt Uro, I've seen it adopt Oko, I've seen it just be red-green. I know that you have mostly moved on from the deck. Jarvis is not like a dedicated lands monster the way Tom is with Depths. Jarvis streams, Jarvis makes content, like he's doing something new a few times a week. But big picture, what's up with lands right now? Like I play against Depths probably 4 or 5 times for every time I see lands, at least in the current metagame.
So I think there's a lot of things going on. Let's talk about the red-green versus 3 or 4 color lens thing for a second, because I have a very unpopular opinion where I believe the more colors you add to that deck, it runs into the same problem that Tom actually described with just black-green Depths, which is once you put so many colorless lands into your deck, even if you play like 35 or 36 or 37, it's actually pretty difficult to have a functional mana base. Especially if you want to cast like a blue, green spell and a red spell, say Valakut Exploration, which I actually do consider to be one of the better new cards for the deck. In addition, I think the other primary issue with the deck is look at Punishing Fire. And you have to ask yourself, is Punishing Fire actually good right now? And my contention, and I think the contention of most other people who play the deck is, no, it's not very good because there's a sore thumb that sticks out, which is Dreadhorde Arcanist. And the land decks have to play some pretty awkward cards to beat that one. There's an uncommon from Amonkhet, or it's either Amonkhet or Hour of Devastation, Grasping Dunes, which is tap or pay 1, tap, sack it, use this ability only as a sorcery, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. You might remember that one from Booster Draft. Not a very decent card in Draft, honestly, but it is a card that they can use to fight this card. So I actually believe that when I play Rug versus lands, I actually feel favored most of the time, depending on the pilot, of course. Someone like it's not a slam dunk, but the combination of Fawn, Arcanist, and even Oko, I think, is a pretty big deal because you can often force them into situations where they have to main phase Marit Lage, and then that deck doesn't have Security Step, so you're like, all right, your Lage is in play Oko second main, make the thing. Or on my main phase, make the thing, an elk, and it's just like, well, that's not fun. So yeah, I think there's a lot of factors going on there, and to be fair, the deck plays a lot of cards I would call bad. I mean bad in the sense that they're synergy cards, right? Exploration, Mox Diamond, Mana Bond, these are not really great cards by themselves, right? They used to form an engine that was greater than the sum of their parts. But the problem is, once you knock out a few pieces of that engine, the deck isn't really very good, I think, a lot of the time. So you see people try to address the problem. They play Abrupt Decay. They play Skyclave Apparition. They have to stretch the mana to do things red-green can't do. I think that's just a recipe for disaster with your mana. Also, like, they can elk your Mox Diamonds, like as Tom said, so your mana no longer functions. It's just, there's so many problems for the deck, and I mean, frankly, you're still not beating a fast combo deck with this deck. Like, it doesn't really happen unless you do a lot of extreme things in your sideboard as well. So I give it I give people props for trying to win with the deck still. I just think they're probably struggling too hard when it's a lot easier to just play one of those like broken decks, like say Rug or Snow, and get a lot more equity out of the time you spend and win. And that's what I've been doing a lot in the serious like showcases. I play either Rug or Snow almost every time. Generally because I think they're really, really good choices for tournaments. They have almost no holes. They're very well rounded, and you know, I don't like working for my wins. That's why I play lands at that one point. Then I stopped playing it because I'm like, wait, this is way too hard. Can I do better? Yes, I can do better. So let's do better.
Yeah, that is a big part of just deck decision making. Like you can play lands. It's a difficult deck to learn how to play optimally. Even if you are playing it optimally, it's not super good right now. Like compared to like a Snow or a Rug Delver. And I don't think there's many easy decks in Legacy, just relative to Magic that you could be playing. But there are definitely decks that are easier than others. Like I would put like Death and Taxes and Red Green lands near the top of the difficulty stack. A lot of people talk about like the blue decks as like being high skill, but they're mostly not. You end up with a lot of binary choices, and this is coming from someone who's built a brand on playing blue decks. Your opponent casts a spell. Does this kill me? If yes, remove it. If no, leave it alone. And you just make that binary decision enough times until the game ends in one way or the other, until you run out of answers or they run out of threats. But like a deck like lands, where you need to be mapping out your like turn 14 on turn 1, like how to when to deploy your loam, how aggressively to dredge, like knowing when to dredge versus when to take a draw, like knowing the math on every single thing, like what are my chances of drawing a gamble right now when I need it, or hitting the mana bond versus like the best 3 lands I could flip off loam. Like all of those things, that's a lot of work to learn how to play it, and it just doesn't even really pay off that hard. So that's a great point. Tom, obviously, you are a depths expert. Does depths hang in like a 9-round Swiss tournament the way that Rug Delver does? Like obviously it's a great deck to queue into leagues with, where like you get your quick 4-1-5-0, you join the next league. Would you play it at a Grand Prix if there was a Grand Prix tomorrow?
Yeah, because that's just basically what I play. Not because I think that it's the best choice. I think one of the reasons I was attracted to bug depths in the first place is because of the variance reduction between all the tutors in the brainstorm, and I don't think any of the variations of depths give you that currently. Even the Once Upon a Time versions don't. The Dark Confidant versions, which I don't think are great or very good at all, don't. And if you're going into a Grand Prix, there's no way I would ever recommend depths over Rogue Delver right now.
Yeah, like that. That's the big takeaway here. Like a lot of the Magic that we're playing right now as Legacy players is in online leagues. Like there's the weekly challenge, there's the showcase once a month. I, as a rule, don't really play Magic Online on weekends because it makes me miserable. And if I'm miserable playing Magic, then I'm doing a bad job. So I mostly only play leagues, which means I play against a lot of combo decks. Because, like Jarvis said, where showing up to play 10 rounds with lands versus 10 rounds with a Rug Delver is just like a massive spew of equity. But showing up to a league with like Snow versus Rainbow Depths is kind of a spew of time equity as well. There's kind of an interesting metagame dynamic based on what day of the week it is in Legacy right now. Just kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've 6-2 or bettered all of the premier events I've played with Rainbow Depths, 8-2 Eternal Weekend, 7-2 the last showcase. So it's not like I don't think the deck can hang. It's just if depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to have fun or to enjoy a tournament or enjoy a strategy you like, by all means, play Depths. If your goal is to actually win the tournament, play Rug or Snow.
Yeah, that's fair.
One slight issue with the comment you made about 5-0 or 4-1s repeatedly. If someone 5-0s like 6 times in a row, I think that's like equivalent to doing well in a challenge or whatever. Like to me, that's enough data to indicate that that's probably a good choice for a big tournament. Like maybe 1-5-0 is not enough, but you have to put some weight on data, you know, if it's not even if it's not exactly the same quality, right?
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. Like if I were Tom, I would play Depths in a Grand Prix tomorrow.
exactly.
The summer of 2019 when Eric Landon was just the farming trophies with Reanimator. He literally did show up to several Grand Prix that summer with Reanimator, even though that deck is one of those decks. I think it's even less stable than Depths. I'm not to say Depths is unstable because I actually do think the deck is very good, but like as far as reducing variance and beating a wide variety of opponents that you're going to play over 2 days of play, I think Reanimator is even less stable than Depths in that environment. And that was just Eric's deck, and he showed up and he made it happen. So being a deck specialist is worth something for sure, and some number of 5-0s equals a reasonable Swiss performance. But again, you're playing against the league metagame.
It's kind of hard to tell if the league metagame is actually different. I'll give you a fun fact. Before Pro Tour 25, what Pascal did, he actually tracked all of the matches that we all played. It actually lined up almost perfectly with the metagame at the Pro Tour. And I don't really have a good explanation with that for that. Like he literally just tracked all of our matches. I told him, "Oh, you should remove duplicates from players," and we did that. It actually was like shockingly close to what the metagame turned out to be in the Pro Tour, minus Blue Black Death Shadow, which didn't really show up in the leagues, but did show up in the Pro Tour. So that's kind of like I'm not sure that you can completely discount it. It's just a question of how you're curating the data. I think the repeated observation by one player thing is something that data people actually have to handle very carefully. And I think a lot of people are not doing their due diligence there. Like, because if you just play against the same person 20 times and they're playing that one deck, but no one else plays it, should you really treat it as 20 different observations or just one observation? Like, I think it's a question of what conclusions you want to make, what you want to do with the data, right?
Right. Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
So I think it's also a question of how you want to define a deck's consistency. Because to me, it's not really, it's sort of this, how do I put it, intangible thing that people throw around. I don't think a lot of people actually measure it, is what I'm saying. Um, I would probably define it as winning over a large sample, right? And I mean, Eric sort of proved that that was possible for Reanimator. Even if the games don't feel very stable, maybe his win rate is still stable despite people not thinking the deck is stable. So, what do you trust? Do you trust the data or do you trust your intuition? And I would certainly agree that Brainstorm and Ponder definitely reduce variance over tournament. There's no question about that because you can basically make your deck do the same thing every game, and that's the strength of the so-called Xerox archetypes. Um, and I think Tom has the same experience. Like he knows how to make his deck more stable by, you know, basically ditching the hands that don't work by pursuing the goal, knowing how to make the deck work. Um, I just wanted to say that I think there has been a perception, and this used to be a big problem in Pro Magic, that people hated playing aggro decks or like all in decks, even at the pro level. And in the past few years, I think the data showed that, oh, it's actually much better to do that than people had thought. So I'm trying to just slowly eradicate that what maybe is left over as a perception, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Those decks, like the aggro decks and stuff, going back to my point about a lot of the choices in control decks being binary and not exactly difficult, you just get to make a lot of them over the course of the game. Like the aggro style and combo aggro, like they exist in the same space. So if you make a small number of decisions pretty quickly, and like those decks are harder because the decision matters more. Like the difference between like, do I lead on my Steplings or my Wild Nacatl out of Zoo, and how do I fetch my lands,
Right.
is way harder than like I need to ponder my way into a Swords to Plowshares to answer that Steplings or Wild Nacatl. And if you pick wrong, like if you led on the Wild Nacatl and attacked for 3 on turn 2 instead of 4 with the Steplings, and your opponent stabilizes at 2, you made a mistake somewhere, and like
Yeah.
those sort of games are actually much harder, I think, to play optimally than the big long control games. To your point about Tom with Depths and Eric with Reanimator last year, how do you factor in like a master of the deck? Because like if Tom is showing up like 85% win rate or whatever, I don't know what it actually is. Tom, do you actually track your win rate?
I have breaks, so I've tracked all of Rainbow just because I want to see how the changes are going as I go along. And I tracked bug depths for a year, but all of the other gap periods I have not. So I take the data with a grain of salt.
Okay. So, let's hypothetically, Tom wins 85% of league matches with Depths, and then some guy copies his list off MTG Goldfish and wins 40%. Like, is that a 85% win rate deck against the field? Like, do we go with the best, or do we go with like what someone in the SCG Swiss rounds is going to present to you? So like, I don't know the answer. Like, I'm not offering this as a counterpoint, just as a thought.
Like most things, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. It's not where the top pilots are, but it's obviously not where the new player is either. Just, I think it was Reddit. Somebody posted all of the data from the last showcase event. Not the challenge stuff that they've been doing recently, but the very first one they did was the showcase event, which I value a lot higher than the challenge as far as validity, because there's a lot of deck masters and just really strong players like Daniel and others that don't touch many challenges but will show up for every showcase. I think Jarvis, that's kind of you as well. And for Rainbow Depths specifically, there were 4 players that played it, and I went 7-2. Michael Mapson went 7-2, and the other 2 players went 5-10. So like you look at the percentage, and it says 60 whatever the percentage was, and Mapson's a depths expert. I've been playing depths for a long time, and I know one of the other players was Achilles that just switched from Maverick, and somebody else that I didn't know. So I don't think the deck is a 5-10 deck. The deck's probably not a 14-4 deck either, so it's probably somewhere in the middle.
So, Tom, you actually took the thought I was going to say, which is the truth is in the middle, because that's clearly the case. And actually, the truth is probably that if a lot of average players don't do well with the deck is probably not good for average players to play. But it's clearly correct for Tom to play. So I think the Reanimator deck for Eric was actually a great example of that, because I know a lot of people picked up that deck after they saw him crushing, and they tried it for like even a reasonable length of time, and they couldn't really reproduce his results even after people claim that deck is simple, and I'm like, I think there's just like a lot of weird corner cases that Eric knows how to handle that you don't. Like when you're still supposed to go all in, when you're supposed to play it slow, like pacing, a lot of like play pattern things that, okay, yeah, you're like the inherent goal in the deck is sort of simple, quote unquote, which is to make a turn 1, turn 2 Crystal Brand while disrupting your opponent slightly. But the details matter a lot more, especially in a post board game, I think. And I think the combination of that and, frankly, the average player doesn't have a lot of time to put in 1,000 reps like Eric or Tom. It's sort of an uphill battle a lot of the time. Whereas a deck like Rug, I think its win rate being over 50% for an average player, or over the cross field, a huge sample size, people playing the deck in events, its win rate being high while being considered to be one of the better decks, I think is a really strong indicator that the deck is good. See Hogak at MC London, where everyone had a target on it, it still had a 55% win rate, and that's just absurd at the PT level.
Those deckmaster edges, like you said, are worth so much. During that summer where everyone was on Reanimator because of Eric, I was beating everyone else, and I was losing to Eric every time we queued into each other. He thought that the blue-white miracle style decks were a joke. I thought Reanimator was a joke. And when we went head to head, he was probably right. What he was doing was imperceptible to me on my side. Right. It looked like he was just casting Entomb and Reanimate just like every other one. But his was working and other people weren't. And it's not because he's the luckiest person who owns Entombs. That's just not the case. And you see these like heroic moments with deck specialists.
Right.
I'll never forget. I was watching some stream one time where Cyrus Cormangill was the guest, and they were playing Ad Nauseam Tendrils, and they had like a pretty clean Ad Nauseam line that it was just like a bunch of rituals and Infernal Tutor, and the person just started playing rituals, and Cyrus is like, wait. Cast Infernal Tutor second to last and hold priority and cast your Dark Ritual in case they have Piracy Charm. And everyone like the chat and like the streamer were all like, okay, whatever, man. And then they had Piracy Charm, and like they would have lost that game if they cast Dark Ritual first. And it's just these tiny little edges that like
Yeah.
because you've played 1,000 reps and you've seen it once before, you've just stuck it in your brain, and just like I'm sure Tom is doing all sorts of stuff with that too. I actually queued into Tom in a video. I was playing the Epic Storm. I had Bryant Cook on the call, so I had the master in my ear, and we were playing against Tom. And in our game one, Tom just didn't know what I was playing, or else he could have mulliganed to a hand that beats me. Like I had a turn 3 Goblin win, and he had a turn 3 Marit Lage win, but he could have mulled for the turn 2 if he knew better. And then he won game 2, and then game 3, I had a hand that could cast Ad Nauseam, and I was like, I can cast Ad Nauseam. And Bryant was like, no, we need to play around Flusterstorm. And I was like, shut up. And I cast Ad Nauseam, and then Tom Flusterstormed us. And I won. Obviously, like you bring in Flusterstorm against the Epic Storm if you have it. But I do wonder, like I couldn't see Tom's side. Like, could he have made a faster Marit Lage that left the shields down to an Ad Nauseam? Was he playing slow? Like, how long would he have held up that Flusterstorm if I didn't just shove into it? Like, all of those sorts of things, like that, that would have been very interesting and would have given a less skilled player opportunity to mess up. So
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and that's one of the things that the newer Depth Shell does well is 3 lands on board or 2 mana and a pedal with 1 combo land represents a crop rotation kill. So if you're not sitting on Chain of Vapor and you play around Flusterstorm, you just lose to a crop rotation. And if you jam, you just lose to the Flusterstorm. And one's a 3 of, one's a 4 of. So I think technically your line was correct in that spot if you're not holding a Chain of Vapor. But it's just a tough spot, period.
yeah, and like those are the sort of things that like I'm not doing that math. Tom obviously knows exactly how that math works. I was just like, I have Ad Nauseam, I want to cast it. I was kind of maiming for the camera, but at the same time, like, and then Tom is like, mathematically, your play was correct. I'm like, okay, it certainly felt bad, but I believe Tom. So Jarvis, we've heard your thoughts about lands in the current metagame. It's a lot of work for not a lot of reason.
Yep.
Tom, we've heard that you would play Depths at a GP, though your best practice recommendation is for just someone who wants to play Legacy is probably just Rug Delver still.
Yeah, again, with the caveat that if what their goals are, if they're looking
Right.
to just have a social event, have some fun with a strategy they enjoy, play what you enjoy. If your goal is to have the highest win percentage or go the deepest in the tournament, get the biggest prize, whatever, yeah, play Delver.
Yeah, Rug Delver. Jarvis also has a Grand Prix top 8 with Rug Delver, so he's been there too. So, do you guys have any closing thoughts you want to talk about Marit Lage some more? I feel like we've hit both these decks pretty good, and we got a surprise conversation about metagame analysis in. So,
We have Jarvis on. How could you avoid that?
yeah, I did budget about 25 minutes in this hour for Jarvis to go on a math-related rant. So I'm glad he did it.
What I could do is I would point out that behind me, you can't see in the video, there is a Marit Lage printing. Maybe I can sneak it in real quick.
Yeah, get it.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. And next to it is the Pro Tour 25 playmat. I don't know if you've seen that one. That one's the one of like one of each card on it.
Yeah, that's a great playmat.
Yeah, I have it framed because it just looks nice. You know.
Yeah, I don't care about playmats at all. Like, I own probably 100 of them, and that's after selling them off at any opportunity. I still have like 100 left, but I was interested in owning that playmat until I learned it was like $350. And it's like, okay, I don't want it that bad. I don't think your shirt has been prominently displayed on camera yet either, so I need you to
Alright.
show the people who you voted for. That's Marit
You
Lage
know,
2020.
and it has a tagline on it. It says, "One counter at a time, if that's what it takes."
Uh,
So I will plug the company who made it. It's actually Cedric's clothing company made this shirt. Cedric Phillips.
Coalesce.
Yeah, it's a really nice shirt. They have a few others. This is free advertising for you, Cedric. You did not pay me.
Cedric, you can join my Patreon to pay for this publicity. Thank you. I know you're a respectable businessman. Tom, you got anything to say? Jarvis just showed us his shirt and his art.
I don't think there's any question who the imposter on this call is after all of the Lage paraphernalia that we've seen.
Yep, for sure. So I guess my last question, Jarvis, I'm sure you've done this. Tom, how often have you paid 30 mana to get your Merit Lage? Just one counter at a time.
More than you would think. It used to come up constantly versus the turbo variations. In the mirror, there are basically 8 copies of Pithing Needle and no removal spells in game one. So the scenarios where anyone is able to combo with Stage or Hexmage are few and far between. Generally, somebody casts a discard spell, somebody casts a discard spell back in the other end, and then in the other direction, and then both players shut off the primary path, and then you just stare at each other for turns trying to kill each other with Elvish Spirit Guides, and which doesn't work very well when 2/1 first strikers hit the table that then stare at each other. Then you have to play around crop rotation, Sajiri step, protecting your 2/1 first strikers. It becomes like a game of limited. And in those scenarios, 30 mana gets paid quite frequently, and often Dark Depths gets named with like another copy of Needle at some point, but it comes up a decent amount.
I love that. I'm a big fan of that. So tell the people where they can find you. Your Twitter handles are under your faces. Where do you stream? Where do you dump your content? Let's hear it as the sign off.
All Negator77, Twitch, Negator77, same thing with YouTube, Discord, and just Tom Hepp on Facebook, I guess.
One last question for Tom, and then I'll let Jarvis plug his stream. Are you going to chase the 77 trophies? Because you're close.
No, there's only like 20, maybe 20 exactly. It's roughly 20 days left, and once I hit 50, I stopped. I slowed down quite a bit. I'm trying not to play more than like 5 matches in any given night, just to avoid burnout. After last year's long season, I stopped playing Magic for the better part of 3 or 4 months afterwards.
Yeah,
I didn't like the Breach meta or the Loris meta anyway, or it would have been a few weeks as opposed to a few months. But
I guess the meme is
yeah,
not worth dying for.
yeah, there's a maximum amount of just jamming any format that you can do before yeah, it just becomes a bit too much. So I'm going to try and avoid that, and I'm not going to be going anywhere near 77.
All right, Jarvis, same question. Are you going to try to get 06 trophies before the season is over?
Count Vintage Cube. I've already passed that.
Oh, not bad.
Uh,
All right, plug your stuff and let's sign this off.
Say Twitter on the thing you can see right there. Twitch, you can find me Jarvis Yu, and YouTube also Jarvis Yu. I'm going to try to produce some YouTube only content. I know Koval, you basically decide to do that full time. It might hit you up for some hints at some point, but I think there is a market for that. It kind of looks nicer a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah, an unedited stream VOD is very difficult to watch a lot of the time. So people do like the straight to YouTube stuff. But that's a conversation for another time. Maybe the next episode of Deep Analysis will be me, you, and Phil talking about how to improve our YouTube analytics. All right, so I'm going to sign this off. Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been Marit Lage, Then and Now, and we'll see you next time.